Good morning. Good morning. This is Karen Dotson from the All of Us Research Program at the Medical College of Wisconsin. And I have with me one of my favorite doctors this morning. Good morning, Dr. Izzy.
Good morning, Karen.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. It's good to have you back in the studio.
I
You were on the
know,
road
right?
last
I
time we
was
were
on the
here,
road, but technology is great.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
When it works, it's great.
When
Yeah.
it worked, I know I was a little worried it might not, but it did. So I'm grateful. We have some great topics today. So I wanted to welcome everybody and to join us at the table this morning. I'm asking you to grab your juice, your coffee, your water, sit down and talk with us. Call us if you have questions or comments. You can always call in at 414-444-5250.
That's right. Pull up to the table.
Pull up to the table or 414-444-5253. And we are going to talk about research today. But I was talking with you earlier that I broke down and got my flu shot this week.
Broke down.
I had to break down. Every year I had to break down because you always wonder like, okay, what is this all about? But I'm feeling pretty good. Just had a little slight temperature, but other
Yeah.
than that, I think I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah. We need to remind people that, you know, everybody feels better that COVID is not what it was. It is still out there. You should talk to your provider about whether you need a booster or another vaccine. But the flu is still a important infection out there. So people still die from the flu. Um, we kind of minimize it. Oh, it's just the flu, but the flu can kill people,
You're right. I
especially
was
older.
exactly. I think people over 65 are more vulnerable, and then also our young folks. But even though people that have compromised immune systems are also challenged with that, and sometimes it get healthy people. Am I correct on that,
Yeah,
doctor?
yeah, yeah. So I'll get a call. Um, Inevitably I'll get a call from somebody saying, I was doing fine. I was at work yesterday, and at 3 o'clock I felt like a truck hit me. So I went home and I got into bed, and this morning I can't even get out of bed. So I need an excuse. And when they give that story, it's a flu.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The flu is like it's a respiratory infection. So you get the cold and symptoms, but in addition to that, you get body aches, fever, just what they call malaise. You just kind of don't feel well.
I was doing a little research. I love to do that, and I was doing some research related to how they determine every year what type of shot they're going to
Mm,
give us.
yeah.
And so I was looking, and they kind of do it across the country or the world to really see exactly like what viruses they feel are going to be really strong out there, and then they get those recommendations.
Yeah. Well, what happens is the southern hemisphere has their winter when we have our summer, and vice
Okay.
versa. So while we were enjoying the summer, Australia and New Zealand and South America were going through their winter, and so they figured, researchers figured, okay, if the flu is going around. Whatever strain is going around the southern hemisphere during their winter, it's probably going to move up to and become the virus the strain we have for our flu season. So that's how they figured out. They look at
I was
what's the
wondering about
prevalent.
that. I'm
Yeah,
like, how do they, so every year they tweak it a little bit, right?
right, right, right. So they look at, okay, what's the prevalent strain that was going on through the southern hemisphere's winter to their flu season, and they try to pick that for ours.
You know what? That's why I said that this man right here is like a walking encyclopedia. Because
Yeah,
he didn't even know that I was going to talk about that until this morning. And
yeah,
he just really has it out there. But I really want to encourage people to get your flu shots. It looks in when I did the research also, it shows that African Americans are the most affected by it. Then it looks like Native American and then also Latino as far as compared to white. So we are challenged with this again, as we always talk about it. So we need to be proactive and, just really prepare ourselves for the winter and to get ourselves healthy, and especially those that are older. So,
hmm,
and then a lot of times, we don't even know, some people don't even realize that they're curing the virus. Like when they said that you might not have symptoms, but you can give them to others.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So especially that's the case with COVID now. In fact, last time I had COVID, I remember it was Father's Day because I was going to do a men's health talk, and I thought my allergies were kind of flaring up. I had been working in the yard the day before. So it was Saturday morning. I said, okay, before I go to this thing, let me just check myself to make sure that I don't want to go somewhere and spread COVID. So I checked myself and I was shocked it was positive. And so I had to cancel it, end up doing it virtually. That worked out. But by by had I not checked myself Saturday, Sunday, I was feeling so much better. I wouldn't even check myself.
Wow.
And by Tuesday, my test was negative again. So yeah, keep in mind that if you have symptoms, get a home test. The home tests are available again. You can order them online for the government will pay for it. I think they'll give you 2 tests per person or something like that.
Okay.
But
Okay.
you can get those home tests. But think about that if you're feeling sick, to check yourself for COVID because that's still out there. And of
Yeah.
course, the flu. Um, COVID is kind of a crapshoot. You know, it may be terrible. My MA, my medical assistant, got COVID. It wasn't for me, but she went to a wedding, destination wedding, and she said it was like the worst flu she ever had. She was
Wow.
in bed, body aches, fever, just felt terrible. And when I had it, it wasn't even as bad as a cold. So it can vary very much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Because I
the
know.
flu is still out there, so get your flu shots.
Yeah, and that's something that I wanted to bring to everybody's attention because they mentioned that the flu season really starts in October. It takes about maybe 2 weeks before your body builds up those antibodies
Right, right.
to help you fight it off. So sometimes when you feel a little achy or feverish, that's just your body's reaction to really trying to kick in those antibodies, Dr. Izzy.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's what it is that your immune system's getting primed, prepped for to make those antibodies to help fight any virus that might end up in your system.
And that really kind of seg it's going to allow for us to move forward into our topic today. And our topic today, we want to talk about research. And the reason why we want to talk about it is that everything related to health has a component of research, or they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to get one on research.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the flu shot, that's
Right.
research.
Right.
And so they're always trying to perfect it, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
as we move forward in this process. So today we're going to have some special guests that are going to talk about research, going to talk about how and why it's important to let the community know that there are measures that help protect each participant, each individual as it relates to research.
Right. We come on every week and we try to encourage people to to consider being involved in research. But we haven't forgotten that it still is a touchy subject in our community because we have been oftentimes instead of participants, we've been victims of
Yes,
research.
yes.
You know.
And we have some strong evidence of that too, Dr. Izzard. And I
Mm-hmm.
know we were talking earlier and you were just kind of mentioning how our community really feels about research and some of
Mm-hmm.
the challenges,
Mm-hmm.
especially related to Tuskegee
Mm-hmm.
and what happened in that area. Why so many people are really hesitant about, especially our people of color,
Mm-hmm.
about being involved in research.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that's um, a lot of people might not know about this. I think everyone's heard about Tuskegee, and even some people have heard about Henrietta Lacks. Um, J. Marion Sims, who's like considered the founding father of modern gynecology, white man back in the Civil War America, experimented on his black slaves,
Mm.
and so a lot of the the stuff we know about gynecology from this founding father of gynecology was done on his slaves, and he would experiment on them, do surgery, cut things, and wouldn't even give them anesthesia.
Oh
You know,
my
and
God.
so yeah, it was basically called a vivisection. When you're cutting somebody without any anesthesia. So, but yeah, a lot of the slaves. His enslaved women contributed to our knowledge of modern gynecology, um, and that's just an example of of how we have been victims of research. But we want to turn the table. We want to make it so that I've said this time and time again. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so we want to be at the table when we talk about research, because research is important. It's extremely important. And in fact, the thing we need to keep in mind is that when new drugs come out, or new procedures come out, or new techniques, or new recommendations come out, we want to be considered in those recommendations. And if we're not considered, then we can't say that whatever they're recommending is going to work for us, because we haven't been tested. And traditionally, we have not been tested in a lot of these things. We got a caller on the line.
All right. Good morning, caller.
Good morning.
You are
And-
at the table with us this morning. Thank you for calling in.
Good morning, and thank you.
Good morning.
Doctor, thank you so much for everything you were just saying. I started that book, Medical Apartheid, which was referred to in that book by the young lady from Cass.
Oh, yeah.
And I couldn't get through it once I got to the part about them experimenting even on the babies,
Uh-huh.
and how they had the black slave women hold down the other black slave women to do the experiments they did, of course, like you said, without anesthesia of any sort, to see our reaction.
Mhm.
All that stuff, of course, still translates today. That's why you have no, what's the word I want to say, security in the medical care you get. You just have always a grain of salt in the back of your head.
Mhm.
And just curious about one other thing, too. Are you familiar with the Black Women's Health Study out of Boston that's been going on since the 70s?
No, maybe just describe it for me.
So it's a study that I've been with it now since like 1974, 75, I
Mhm.
think.
Mhm.
And it's because I subscribed to Essence magazine at that time.
Mhm.
They sent out a request and a feeler, and I did everything all these years, and I've been doing the surveys, but I wouldn't give them my DNA. That's the only thing I refuse to do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that. But thank you so much for being there, both of you. Dr. Izzard, my auntie, and I'm almost 70 myself, used to hang out with I think it was your grandmother years ago,
Uh-huh.
when she lived off of Oak Locust. And
Oh,
they used to
yeah.
have in the old days,
Uh-huh.
the women's groups, because you couldn't gather with anyone else, you
Right.
gathered amongst yourself.
Right.
And they had their teas and stuff. Thank you for everything you guys have given. God bless.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you for calling in. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, back in those days, they thought that Black women couldn't even feel pain. That's why they didn't give them.
Well,
give
they,
anesthesia.
a lot of times they felt
Or that
as though
higher
we weren't
tolerance.
really human,
Right.
as so they didn't look at us being human beings.
Mhm.
And so, historically, when we start looking at all what we have gone through, we know that there's challenges with people wanting to be involved in research.
Mhm.
And, that's one of the reasons why I'm here today. You're here today because we know the importance of research, but we also realize and know the challenges that people face by, afraid to be involved in research as well.
Mhm. And the last call, I'm glad you are enrolled in that study, because, like I was saying, if we're not included in these trials, and when things are approved, we don't know how much of these recommendations apply to. In fact, traditionally, women haven't been involved in these studies. They've been healthy white men, and so there's been a big push to try to get more diversity in these trials, because you can't make a conclusion, especially when it comes to like cancer. Okay, if you're trying to treat a certain kind of cancer, say you're treating breast cancer, or let's say prostate cancer, which we know about. We know that we have recommendations as far as screening for prostate cancer, and what tests we do and how we follow up. But those recommendations are based on studies that a lot of times lack Black men. And we know that Black men, when they have prostate cancer, tend to have more aggressive and more advanced. So do the recommendations that they're putting forth, do they apply to Black men? Maybe we should be more aggressive in how we treat Black men with prostate cancer. Maybe we should be doing something different. Maybe our screening interval should be different. So and again, unless we're in those studies, we don't know.
Exactly. And so that's one of the reasons why we've been pushing our community to really get involved in research. And we're going to talk also about there's a difference between research and clinical trials as well. And so we're going to get into that. But it looks like we have another caller on the line. All right, from Germany. All right, we have a caller on the line. Good morning, caller. Thank you for coming and sitting at the table with us.
Hello, lady, and hello, gentlemen.
Good morning.
This is Rick calling you long distance from Germany.
All right, Rick.
All right. You had to.
Uh,
Wiedersehen.
I want to say, wie geht's dir? How are you two?
We're good. Good.
We're
Thank you
good.
for asking.
Okay. I grew up knowledgeable that my family had a strange form of tuberculosis.
Mm,
It was not tuberculosis of the lungs, but tuberculosis of the bone, brain, and spine.
mm,
And I am conspiratorial in how we got this. I believe it was fed to a group of blacks in America, not everybody,
mhm,
but they got a few, and a few Native Americans through uh, the doctor's office, experimental drugs, um, and I would like to ask you what is going on with tuberculosis of the lungs as you understand it today.
Yeah. Tuberculosis, thank God, is not something that I see a lot of. I'll have patients every now and then who have a positive, what they call a TB skin test. We'll do a PPD. Well, for those who don't know, the PPD skin test is they'll take a little small amount of the bacteria that causes tuberculosis, and they put it under your skin, and it's not enough to get you sick, but you'll have, if you've been exposed to it, if you've had either an infection or you've been exposed to it, and you have antibodies to it, you'll have a reaction to it, and so you'll get a bump on your arm where they do the injection. And every once in a while I'll have somebody who has that, but usually the people that are highest risk are people who are immigrants, because there's a higher chance that someone who's immigrated here has been exposed to tuberculosis maybe in their home country, or people who are homeless, people who have been in places where they might have come in contact with it. But we don't see a whole lot of it here in the U.S. So it's interesting to hear that you got disseminated TB here in the U.S. We got a break coming up. I don't know if you want to stay on the line. Oh, you're off the line. But as far as conspiracy buffs go, I guess I hold a healthy skepticism. So I've been in medicine long enough to know that stuff does happen.
Mhm.
But some of these things are kind of really outrageous if you think about how we had a whole lot of the stuff going on during the COVID vaccine, and people thinking that we're putting tracking monitors in there. How would we even do that? We don't have nanotech. If we had that kind of nanotechnology, we'd be doing a whole lot more with it. But there are a whole lot of people that are scared. And again, I understand why people are afraid of stuff we don't understand. But use a little knowledge and common sense, and do the research. If you have a question about something, ask your provider. If you don't have a provider that you trust, then find one that you do trust.
Exactly. We're going to be right back in a few minutes. This is WNOV 860 AM and 106.5 FM. We'll see you on the other side. I want to welcome everybody back
Good
to
morning.
At the Table this morning. This is Karen Dotson from the All of Us Research Program at the Medical College of Wisconsin. And I have with me Dr. Kevin Izzard,
Yes.
family
yes.
practice physician, well known in the community, involved in multiple different uh, organizations. I'm thinking like first of all, Cream City, the president of Cream City, and also he's a co-investigator for the All of Us Research Program, director of a church choir, and I always like to throw that in there because I'm just amazed that you have time for that after all the other things.
Yeah.
On the deacon
Yeah.
board,
Elder.
elder,
yeah,
So
so-
I mean, this man just doesn't really
Try not to
sleep,
get too
and
busy.
we have Jermaine is actually on the boards today with us, and he mentioned and he had a certain question related to the COVID vaccine, and I think that's something that we all probably should talk about, Dr. Izzard.
Yeah. So Jermaine had asked, why should I get the COVID vaccine if you're giving me parts of the virus? And so, and to his credit, he Googled it, and pulled it up, and it said, it said that the vaccine contains protein subunit. It said the protein subunit vaccines contain pieces of proteins of the virus that causes COVID-19. And he said, well, why would I get it if it's going to give me some, particles, proteins that cause it? Well, and originally when he asked about the COVID vaccine, I said, no, it's mRNA vaccines, so it's a new technology. They're injecting you with this mRNA, which is a short-lived messenger RNA that actually makes proteins. And what made it novel, what made it different, what made it important is that for the first time they were injecting something in you, a piece of messenger RNA that can make the protein that would actually fight against the virus. So then I said, no, they're not injecting the protein in there. And he pulled this up on Google. And what I forgot to tell him, and this is something that people should know too, is that there are really two different vaccines out there. The ones that most people have been talking about, that people have heard about, are what they call mRNA vaccines, and that's the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. And those are still big. Now, if you go back, a couple of years when we were fighting about this, there were a lot of people who did not trust that new technology because it was new. They're injecting this, even though it's messenger RNA and it doesn't live long. People are uncomfortable with them injecting any kind of DNA or RNA into you. And so there is a vaccine that's the traditional vaccine. That's Novavax. Okay. And so in the traditional vaccines, what they do is they'll give you either an inactivated virus, or they'll give you a altered virus or a part of the virus, so that what happens when your immune system sees that piece of the virus, that protein that identifies the virus, your immune system makes antibodies against it. So if it ever sees the entire virus intact, it knows it's because it's seen it already, and it can attack it sooner and keep you from getting sick. So there is still the Novavax. And that's the one that he was looking at. That one is still, it uses protein particles, so that they inject into you. So they're not injecting actually COVID that's active. It can't. This is just pieces of it. So unless it assembles together and infects your cell, these particles can't do anything to you. But yeah, that's how vaccines work. With the flu vaccine, that's the way it works. We're giving you particles that of an inactivated virus.
That is something that I always think about. Some people say, well, I got the vaccine and now I'm sick.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened to me years ago when they were doing the flu vaccines. And for so many years I said, well, I'm not going to take it, but I think they really improved it because now I'm not like that. But I think is that the case, Dr. Izzard, back then it's a lot different than it is now?
Well, what can happen is that just the fact, like a lot of people saw this with COVID. You got the vaccine and the next day they were sick, and that's just because your immune system is getting revved up and it's making antibodies. And so as part of that, you can get like a low grade fever, you can get body aches because, and even swollen lymph nodes. Some people get swollen lymph nodes because that's where the antibodies are made.
Mhm.
And so, so that can sometimes happen. Usually if it does happen, it's mild and it's only for a day or two at the most. But yeah, people can have those kind of reactions. Also, we usually are given the flu shot during cold and flu season. And so this time of year, if you get the flu vaccine and then the next week you get a cold or bad cold or something, it's probably a coincidence that maybe you were going to get it anyway. It just so happened that you got your flu shot,
Oh,
around that time.
okay.
So I tell my patients that if you get the flu from this, I want to know about that because I want to document that. So let me know. We'll do a flu test, to verify that's actually the flu, because that would be notable if people were getting the flu from the flu vaccine. Because why would I give the flu vaccine if I'm gonna make people sick from it?
Yeah,
So,
and that's what I think a lot of us are fearful of.
mhm.
But now that I'm more knowledgeable about vaccines, and so when I have a little temperature, I'm like, okay, my antibodies are really kicking in now. It's
Yeah.
starting to work. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
I
be
kind of feel
healthier.
bad because I didn't get anything. When I got my COVID vaccine, I didn't get anything. So I said, I want to know.
What?
I want to know what's working. At least make me sick a little bit.
Well, I can feel it, I tell you. So I guess you have a point with that. But and then the other question is that for people that have had that have had COVID, the virus in the last few months, do they need to get a vaccine?
Yeah, we still believe that once you get COVID, and this is the thing about COVID, why it's not so bad anymore, why you're not hearing about all the hospitalizations and the deaths. There are people still getting sick from it, but 95% of people now have either had COVID, the actual infection, or they've had the vaccine. So, and I told people when this first came out, and it's proven to be 100% true. The real danger, the concern about COVID-19 was that it's a novel virus. Novel meaning that people had never been exposed to it before. And because of that, your immune system doesn't know what to do with it. And so when it ends up in your system, again, you have all these antibodies floating around for stuff you came in contact with as a kid. And so something comes in, the flu or whatever, and your immune system kicks in. In the case of the flu, it's maybe a little late because it's been altered from the one before. So it takes a little longer to kick in. And by that time you get the flu. But you've never been exposed to it, and so your immune system overreacts or it acts too late, and so you get the infection. I said we got a call on the line. We'll be right with you, caller. Now that everybody's been exposed to it, and most people have had it or been vaccinated, their immune system now is tolerating it better, and so people aren't getting sick with it like they did before, and I guess that's a testament to the fact that now it's part of our regular um, you know, viruses that we come in contact with day to day. So to your point, to your question, if you've had COVID, if you've actually had COVID infection, COVID-19 infection, within the last 3 months, you're probably good because your immune system is still, those
Kicking in there, huh?
antibodies are still floating around for it.
Okay, that's good to know. Caller, welcome to the table this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Dr. Izza, whatever your name is.
That's my name.
My sister, Marva Monroe, my late sister, thought you were the Max.
All right.
Give me a big head over here.
Your explanation of the COVID or whatever was the best I've ever heard, and it needs to be spread more around.
Oh, well, thank you.
And you have a good one, Doctor.
You too. Thank you for that, because we forget, especially now, again, COVID, people are over COVID and they don't want to talk about it anymore. And you assume with all the talking we did that everybody knows about it. But,
Right.
I guess people don't. People need a reminder too. People are asking me about, should I get the COVID booster shot? And I'm going to say, first of all, talk to your healthcare provider about whether, you have risk factors that make you, more prone to getting it or more prone to having complications from it. But as for myself, I know my wife got it. And I had it Father's Day. So it's probably just beyond 3 months now. So I'm probably not going to get the booster, and unless there's a new variant that comes out that's very virulent, because I said the last 2 times I've had has been very mild, But again, you got to know yourself, and you got to know, what your risk factors are. And if you're older, if you have chronic health conditions, if you're working with people that are immunocompromised, like you're taking care of a parent or a sick child or something, you might want to rethink about, because then your risk, if you get it, of causing other problems is higher. But again, if have the conversation with your provider about whether you need the booster shot. But you say, at least if you've never had the vaccine, I would say go ahead and get it. If you've had the initial shot and the booster, that they recommended way back in 2021 and 2022, then you're probably okay.
What about people that have not had the virus, who never had COVID,
Mm-hmm.
never had the vaccine? So obviously they must have some type of antibodies right now to fight off this, right?
Well, maybe, but the other thing too is, like I said, my Father's Day incident. Had I not checked myself, I thought it would have been allergies, and I was feeling better Sunday, so I wouldn't have checked. I wouldn't have known if that was my first time, because that was my second time. Had that been my first time and I didn't check, I wouldn't know I had COVID. So there may be people out there who've had COVID, had a mild case, thought it was their allergies, or thought they had a cold, and they never tested. And I would be willing to bet that most of those people, if you check their system for antibodies, they've had it. They've been exposed to it. They either had it or they had a very mild case.
And a lot of times we might be carriers of it and don't have symptoms. And so
right.
That's interesting, because I know I have a friend of mine that never had it before, but yet and still been around people and been exposed, but never had it. So obviously either they have great antibodies or something else is going on there.
Yeah.
So this is really a good conversation when we talk about, this is getting close to flu season right now. October is when it really starts. What was that?
Oh.
Okay, go right ahead.
OG Devo's got a question.
I know. Let's hear this.
Well, Dr. Izzard, you alluded to, and you spoke to the government giving you the testings. So in your opinion, how much faith can we have in those tests? I mean, are they 100%, 90%? I mean, is there a chance that you could get a defective kit that could give you a false reading or what have you? So, I mean, how much faith do you have in being in the medical profession, in the kits themselves?
Well, I would say it's the best. it's the best way to determine it. They're not 100%. I think back, if I can remember back when we were doing when those tests first came out, the antibody tests, they're like 80% effect, sensitive, meaning that there's a chance you could have it and it won't detect it, or it could give you a false positive. And a lot of it too is when you start having people doing it themselves, you got user error too. So people may not be doing the test correctly, or you might have expired tests. But for the most part, it's a good indicator about if you have symptoms and you have a positive test, you probably have it. And so you should isolate yourself for 5 days, and then you can repeat the test after that. So they've actually said now, because it's not as virulent as it was before, that if you do get it, you should isolate yourself for 5 days, then wear a mask for 5 days, a good fitting mask, not one of these gaiters or something, but it's something that's gonna really filter your breath, and then you should be okay. So most people do not need to even necessarily see their doctor. Definitely don't go to the ER, unless you're sick. But keep in mind that it's not just you. There are other people around you who may react differently. You might say, "Oh, this is this is not even a cold for me," so I don't need to do anything. Well, you don't know the next person how they're going to react to it.
Exactly. That's something that everybody's a little bit different. So I think that I might be in the clear then too, because I had COVID around August. So
yeah.
So I'm like, okay, maybe I don't need to. But one thing you mentioned too, Dr. Izzard, and then we're going to kind of switch gears here a little bit, but you mentioned that the only way that you would maybe consider getting a COVID vaccine is something would change with the virus. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So they're still continue to surveil the viruses. So again, not a lot of people are getting tested, going to the doctor's office and getting a culture that gets sent to the laboratory. I found this out that's very interesting. most of the way they tell how they tell when the virus is active in the community, because most people aren't getting tested. I see a caller on the line. We'll get to you, caller. And most people aren't being tested. So how do they know? Well, what they're doing now is they're able to look at the sewage, and they're able to get the virus out of the sewage, and they can tell when the viral count goes up in the sewage. That actually even happens faster than we start seeing in the offices.
Wow. So that kind of lets us know. So that's really a good indicator.
Yeah. But anyway, so they're looking at those viruses, and they're looking at the DNA, and they say, okay, has this changed significantly? And that's how they come up with these different variants. Some of the variants, these are it means a mutation. So, the virus mutates and it changes a little bit. And sometimes it makes it more virulent, so it attaches better and it causes more illness. And some variations, just don't do much of anything other than change it.
So that's what we got to kind of look out for. So that's good indication, because I was wondering about that too. So thank you, Dr. Izzard, for that. We talked a lot about research, and do we have a caller on the line? Okay. Caller, you on the line. You at the table. Good morning.
Good morning, caller.
Good morning. Am I coming through? Good morning.
You're coming through. We hear you. We're loud and clear.
There we are. All right. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Carvey. Good morning, Mr. Rideout. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Izzard.
Good morning.
And your brother as well, and other family members as well. Tyrone W. speaking. Good morning, Milwaukee.
Good morning, Tyrone.
Yes, sir. You were speaking about the different variations of corona and all that, but I would just say, even this time of year when your air is compromised, because yes, they were my friends, and even though I did volunteer, longtime neighbors, the secondhand smoke, because I had a couple of beers, like I said, volunteer, but I mean, not 1, 2, 3 persons got to smoking, and by the time the secondhand smoke got to me, oh man, it's like I was about ready to fall out. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going outside, and I felt better even though it was cold outside, the air, I felt better.
Yeah.
But I was like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Because I can't breathe in here. So yeah, secondhand smoke will be a challenge.
Yeah.
And that's quite a compromise. Yeah,
right.
That's quite a challenge.
Yeah.
But
yeah. You bring up a good point.
But yeah, thank you. Have a great day and a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, a couple of things you said that are kind of important related to that. One is that African Americans, our community, we have a higher incidence of asthma than other people. And so a lot of us, maybe if you had asthma as a child and you outgrew it, you still may be more sensitive to smoke or other strong smelling odors. And so, that's something to keep in mind, that, we do have a higher incidence of asthma, and asthma can kill you, if you have a bad asthma attack. And so, make sure that you're getting treated for that. If you're using your inhaler on a daily basis, or even multiple times a week, you should really see your provider about, you probably need to be on a steroid too, to kind of, because you get inflammation in your airway. The inhaler, the albuterol inhaler, relaxes the smooth muscle in your bronchioles. And so, you can get more air in there. But when that goes on daily for a long period of time, your whole airway gets inflamed. And so, relaxing the smooth muscle doesn't help anymore. You need to have something to stop the inflammatory process going on, and that's when you need to get on an inhaled steroid. And if it's bad enough, they'll let me give you oral steroids, to kind of break that inflammation and that mucus that's being made. So yeah, that's important. And then the other thing, environmental toxins. Those of us who live in major cities, especially in our communities, we're more exposed to environmental toxins. So it's not just the cigarette smoke; it's the cars driving by, and the trucks, and the factories that may be nearby, and all that stuff is in the air. And even, I'm almost 60 years old, lived here my whole life. I never remember us having smoke coming down from Canada every year.
Right.
I don't know what's up with that.
That's crazy.
Every year we've had it now, and so we have these bad air quality days because of smoke coming from forest fires in Canada. So that affects people's breathing too.
And that's one reason when you mentioned about environment, and I'm thinking about the All of Us research program and why it's so important to be involved in research, and why we have so many questions when people join our program, is because environment means a big difference. You know, where we live, are we urban? Are we rural? Are we
Right.
in apartments? Are we in single family homes? Where exactly do we reside? And that makes a big difference. And so I just wanted to invite people to, if you're interested in a research program that's different than a clinical trial, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, the differences. But the research program, you can call all of us research program at 414-955-2689, and we can assist you, or you can go to joinallofus.org to get a part of this program. This is really, we're looking at the biggest database in the world. Our ultimate goal is get to 1 million. We have over 800,000 right now signed up, and probably, those that are actively involved around 700,000, anywhere from 650 to 700,000 actually enrolled in the program all the way. And so we want to encourage people to consider joining to get information as well.
You said something key there. So what happens when you sign for All of Us, you're actually enrolling in the database. You're not actually enrolling in the study. And so what will happen is, let's say we're talking about, we want to look at asthma. We want to look at the effect of living in an urban environment. So I might be a researcher somewhere, anywhere in the country, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm looking at, I want to look at people who have a history of asthma. Let's say who had a history of asthma as a child, and I want to see what effect their environment has on their breathing as an adult. So what I can do is I can go, if you're in All of Us, someone in another state can pull up information that you have given permission to already. It's in the database. So they go in the database, they pull up, okay, I want you to screen for people, adults who live in urban environments, who have a diagnosis of asthma at some point in their life, and their incidence, how many times they have a medical code for respiratory infection. And so I might see, oh, well, people who have asthma have had more diagnoses from their doctor for respiratory infections than people who have not had asthma. But that's the way that research works. The more people you have, the more accurate the data can be. And so no one is actually calling you and saying, oh, we want you to be enrolled in this because I'm looking at asthma. What they do is they can, once you give consent, your information's out there. It's de-identified, so they can't tell who it's from. They're looking at aggregate data. So they're looking at, hundreds of thousands of people, in this case, millions of people. And so they might, when they do the screen, they might pull up, several 100,000 people, and they can whittle it down to, again, urban areas versus rural areas. They can look at zip codes, and they can determine that, the prevalence of infections, respiratory infections in people who have had a history of asthma. So that's how it works. So they're not using your individual DNA. They're not contacting you for more information. Once the information is in a database, then they're using that stuff. And so when you do those surveys, it's important because that's how they can tell, where you live, like what environment you live in, and your age and your demographics. And then you also can give them permission to access your health records. So at night in your doctor's office, your information uploads to the system, and so they can kind of see, they can follow your health from there on. So you might come in, you might have a certain health status, and then that might change over the years, and that's kind of important. We can see how your health status changes.
That's really key. We're going to kind of change a little bit as far as what we're talking about. We talked about research and how it's important. There's also a component with what we call clinical trials as well. And I have Deb Nevels with us. She is here and works at the Medical College of Wisconsin as a program manager for community outreach engagement for the medical college. And she's going to join us when we come back from break to talk a little bit more about research and also about the different components related to clinical trials and why you might want to consider this, and how you are also being protected when you are a participant as well. So if you have calls or you have questions, you want to sit with us at the table, feel free to call 414-444-5250 or 414-444-5253. We'll see you on the other side. I want to welcome everybody back. This is Karen Dotson from the All of Us Research Program at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and I have two special people with me today, Dr. Kevin Izzard, family practice physician, and also Deb Nevels, who is the program manager for the Cancer Outreach Program as well. And we have been having some really good conversation. And Deb, just wanted to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
And, you brought it to our attention that we need to have more discussion about how people are really being protected, how they're being treated related to research.
Yes.
And so, I know we also have another special caller on the line today that actually, I want you to introduce him as well.
Sure. So one of the things is that we have protections, and I work for the Medical College of Wisconsin, and there is protections, and it's called the Institutional Review Board. And our guest today, Dr. Ryan Spellacy, he's a bioethicist, so he does a lot of work around research and ethics, and he also happens to be over the Medical College of Wisconsin's Institutional Review Board. And part of the reason we wanted to bring Dr. Spellacy in on the conversation, with all of us being a research project, and we constantly talk about advances in research, advances in medicine, none of that could happen without research. And there's also been a lot of protections put in place for patients. And so I want to invite Dr. Spellacy, if you can come up to the table, and we'll start that conversation.
All right. Welcome to the table. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Dr. Spellacy, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. So, Dr. Spellacy, we just started talking a little bit about the goal of the Institutional Review Board and what that does to protect patients. And since you are our guru on, you are the all-knowing for the medical college and beyond about what this Institutional Review Board does. Could you give us just a little bit of background about what an IRB is?
Sure. So IRBs or Institutional Review Board, basically any research that involves people, human beings, has to be reviewed by one of these boards before it even starts, before you even approach the first patient about participating in a study. And that's because of a law that was passed, the National Research Act, in 1974. And that was in response to some of the scandals and research abuses like Tuskegee, Willowbrook, and things like that. And so an entire framework was put in place to make sure that there's an independent set of eyes that looks at any research that involves people, to make sure that it's ethical, it's safe, and that the rights of the people that are giving enough to participate in research are protected.
I have a question for you as far as who actually would be on this board.
Yeah, so that same National Research Act kind of lays out a framework for who should be on the board. And these boards are local, so we're all from the community, and we try to make it so that these boards reflect our community, and we have input to make sure that this research is kind of acceptable in our community, that this would be an okay thing to happen. So the regulations require basically different roles. So we have to have scientists, we have to have non-scientists. And so scientists could be anything from people that work on molecules and basic lab research to physicians. And then we have to have non-scientists, meaning people that don't do research for a living, because you want to get both perspectives. We have to have what's called unaffiliated members. So we have to have people who neither they nor their family, like I'm at the Medical College of Wisconsin. We have people that have nothing to do with the Medical College of Wisconsin, don't work there, don't go to school there. And so you really want to try to get these diverse viewpoints to make sure that we've got a committee that really can look at this from all aspects. And so we've got physicians, nurses, lawyers, chaplains, retired school teachers, all kinds of folks on the IRB.
You know, the other thing that I really think is interesting when you talk about the IRB, and you start looking at the involvement is that you also have, once you start working with a grant or if you're doing a study, a lot of times there's like a principal investigator.
Mhm.
Can you speak to that and also to a research investigator?
Right. So the principal investigator or research investigator, really, the principal investigator is the person that's ultimately responsible for the conduct of the research. And so we look at that, and the principal investigator, the PI, he or she is in charge of the research, and they're in charge of making sure everything gets done. So they're in charge of their staff. They're in charge of making sure that they understand what's supposed to happen in this research. You know, they know that, okay, this patient coming in for the second visit, they're getting a blood draw. But they're also responsible for making sure that the people that enroll in a study are informed and make a voluntary choice that is right for them. So ultimately, there's a lot of responsibility on those PIs to make sure that the research is done right.
You know, I agree. And I'm just thinking about, especially like the All of Us research program, we have like Dr. Uh, Franco,
Hmm.
Zeno Franco, and he's our PI, and they take it very serious as far as any issues with participants. We have to do write-ups. I mean, there's a lot that goes on with that when you're working with research. That they want to make sure that the process is overseen appropriately and properly, and that if there's any variation or a change, then we need to write it up and it has to be investigated. Is that the way it works there?
Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. When Dr. Franco, as the local PI for the All of Us study, the IRBs don't just review a study and say, okay, you're good to go. Good luck. We need to see for something like the All of Us study, for example, the IRB gets an annual report from the researchers, the PI, that summarizes how many folks have enrolled in the study. Have there been any adverse events that you weren't expecting, or maybe that you were expecting? Because we'll look at that and say, okay, as maybe we were expecting a certain adverse event in the study because we know that it's a drug study and this drug has this side effect. But what if we start seeing it more frequently than we expected it? You know, maybe there's something about this drug in this patient population or this disease or something like that we're doing research to find these things out. Maybe there's a new risk, or you could have an adverse event that's totally unexpected. And things like that need to be submitted to the IRB within 5 days, because we take those very seriously to make sure that really that the research is safe and that the people that are enrolled in research understand what they're getting into. So if we discover a new risk, the IRB will say, okay, you need to change your consent form, and you need to go back to the people who are already enrolled and inform them of this new risk. And there's other steps in place too. You know, if they make a change to the research, that has to be reviewed by the IRB and approved before it can go forward. So there's lots of steps and checks in place to keep monitoring the research to make sure that it's safe and ethical.
And you know, one thing that you mentioned, and I want to make sure that people understand, like the All of Us research program is a little different than some of the other research programs related to clinical trials. And so that's where, you know, when you were just talking, you know, lastly about some of the different challenges that some of the participants might face, that is what you're really speaking to there. When you start mentioning that, you know, the way that people, what they're given and all those kinds of things. Because with our program, we just basically enroll people. We look at their data, you know, and we also look at like electronic health records and just kind of follow them along the way. But there are other research projects that really involve clinical trials too, right, Deb?
Yeah, and when you are, and because it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month,
Yes.
and I still want to circle back to that. There is, for example, there's a behavioral research that goes on. And so what we want to look at is that if we have individuals participating in exercise, if we have individuals checking their blood pressure, if it's something that the individual is doing for themselves and it's a behavior change, we also have research that still goes through the IRB that's very similar. So one of the projects that I think of, Dr. Melinda Stolle has a project that we've mentioned, she's been on before, Everyday Counts. And so Everyday Counts is a study that works with women who have metastatic breast cancer, and that it means that this cancer has spread beyond the original area where the cancer was found. And so that study it implements exercise and behavior. And so there can be, and at the same time, there could be adverse effects based upon that. And that would still have to be reported back to the IRB. But there are different types of research. We talk about clinical trials, and that's some that might involve drugs. But there's also behavioral research, which involves individual choice or behavior changes. The other projects we've talked about before, also by Dr. Melinda Stolle, is around prostate cancer, the Men Moving Forward project. That went through the IRB. That's a longstanding project. I think it's in its leading up to its final cohort now, but this is for men who have been diagnosed with prostate cancer, specifically African American men, and they introduce exercise and behavioral change in diet. So introducing this information to someone is another way that you can, introducing behavior change is another type of research that can also be taken. And it's the same, it still goes through IRB, even if it doesn't involve medication, it still goes through IRB. And that's what's really critical, that we are constantly monitoring and protecting the participants in this type of research.
Deb, you really bring some important facts up. And Dr. Spelsey, I wanted to have you comment on it because also ethically, when you're looking at ethically, I'm not saying that right today.
You're right.
But, ethics really plays an important part about how and when we want to monitor and look at what's happening in those studies. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So, I'm biased because I am an ethicist, so I would agree with you that it's critically important. And Deb brought up all the different research that we do at the Medical College of Wisconsin, ranging from, we've got researchers that are doing imaging research on structures of the eye that lead to understandings of blindness or macular degeneration. We've got researchers that do focus groups or behavioral interventions like Dr. Stolle. And one of the fascinating things about being on an IRB is that we get to see all of this stuff and really see the wide breadth of research that's going on at the medical college. But we have to be careful because you see a research study that involves maybe a drug that's brand new and they're testing it for the first time in people. We understand what the risks are, or we know what sorts of risks we might face, but we also have to look very closely at something as simple as a behavioral intervention from Dr. Stolle. Her research is fascinating because she's doing research on, because of prior research, women with breast cancer are living longer, but they're also living with the side effects of the treatment that saved their lives or extended their lives. And now they have new medical issues to deal with. And so her exercise research is critically important, but these are people, obviously, and they have rights, and they should know for themselves whether or not they want to participate in this research. They should know what they're getting involved in. They should know things like, how is my data going to be? What are you going to ask of me? What kind of data are you going to take about me as a human being? And how are you going to protect that? What are you going to do to make sure that, we see stories in the paper every day and on the news about data breaches at stores and whatnot. Well, people should be rightly concerned about that. So in the consent process, we need to be explaining to them, this is what we're going to do to protect your data, to make sure that there's no breach. And the IRB is looking at that as well to say, is this sufficient? Are these steps enough to protect their data?
One thing that you mentioned that I really think is significant, especially when you're looking at clinical trials, and you mentioned about sometimes people that have to take certain drugs, but before they get into that clinical trials, what are some of the steps that are looked at before human beings are then involved in that?
Do you mean in the design of the research itself,
Yes,
or
yes.
Okay, yeah. So usually with a drug study, there's developed testing in animals, and it turns out that different animals have different organs and things like that that more closely mimic the human body. And so certain drugs or devices we might test in certain animals because, say, the kidneys on this rat are fairly similar to a human. And that'll give us a sense of, is this drug promising? Or, really at that point, a colleague of mine once said, at that point, it's not a drug, it's a chemical compound. And we do the research in the animals first to try to understand if this is safe, and try to understand if it might work, if it shows promise. And then we will very slowly and very closely, with very few people, introduce it into people in a research study. And so, large scale research studies sometimes have thousands of people, but when they get started, it really can be as much as we will enroll one person, put them through at the lowest possible dose, monitor them closely, see what we see. And if we don't see any concerning side effects, we'll enroll the second person. And then maybe we might increase the dose. And they're monitoring for side effects very, very closely. And if they see anything, they pause it. You might see on the news and such, I know that in the previous hour we were talking about the COVID vaccine, and there was some news about a vaccine that the FDA put a clinical hold on. And there were clinical holds on other studies during COVID. And those of us in the research world see that and we say, good, that's the way it's supposed to happen. When we see something in these early trials that it's the first time we've given to people, there's safety procedures in place that will halt the trial, and then you get the scientists to pore over the data to find out, okay, what's going on? Can we move forward, or do we need to stop? And they're very, very conservative about that.
Yeah, I think Dr. Spellacy, the other piece, and Karen, the other piece that's really critical, and as a participant in the All of Us study, I'm familiar with this,
Yeah.
is that at any time during a study, if you decide to participate, you can say, I don't want to do this anymore.
Exactly. That's right.
And
Yeah.
so that's another protection that's in there. You don't have to continue doing it. Your doctor, the researcher, isn't going to be upset or mad. That's information that they may ask you, so why have you decided to stop? That's information that they need to know. If there's something like, I have way too many visits, I'm really busy, or with the All of Us study, I just don't want to do, one more testing or one more test,
Survey or
survey. Yeah, I don't want to do
questionnaire.
one more survey. But
Yeah.
that's the thing to also remember in the patient protections, you do have the opportunity to say, I don't think I want to do this.
Mm.
And we respect that decision, but understand that, that in itself is information that we still need to understand. Okay, why did you make that decision? Is there something that we on our side need to take note of that might modify
Mhm.
when the drug is
Yeah.
implemented, that it goes out into public? So that's one of the protections, and one of the things I wanted to make sure, Dr. Spellacy, that you help us define. We talk about vulnerable populations, and I
Mhm.
think of vulnerable populations, someone who has been diagnosed with cancer, and they just want whatever you can do. And at that point, you're just like, that's a vulnerable population. You're in a vulnerable situation because you have a diagnosis. You're nervous. You're scared, and
Yes.
you want whatever can happen. And so we have protections in place for research for those vulnerable populations. And Dr. Spellacy, if you can feed onto that a little bit more, add some more on from your perspective.
Sure. Yeah. No, this is really important. So I often say, in research, there's vulnerable and then there's vulnerable. And the regulations, the rules of research calls out certain populations as vulnerable populations, and they have extra rules in place to protect them. And the reason those groups are singled out, and they include children, prisoners, and pregnant women, the reason they're called out is there have been research abuses in the past on these populations. And because of their situation, their physiology, what have you, it is possible that they could be abused in the future. So there's a bunch of extra rules we have to follow if we're doing research on prisoners, pregnant women, or children. And then the research also calls out this sort of colloquial sense of vulnerable, where you might not be a prisoner, or a child, or a pregnant woman, but you just got a diagnosis of cancer, and you're desperate, and you'll take whatever research might offer some chance. As an ethicist on the IRB, I want to make sure that you're making the decision that's right for you. And so I want to make sure you understand the realistic possibility of benefit of this research. I mean, it's research. We don't know if it's going to work or not. We hope it will. In reality, this might be a study that the drug doesn't work, but the things we learn from this study 10 years from now could help people with your disease or something like that. And I actually got involved in research like this because of a friend of mine who was diagnosed with multiple myeloma. And he told me a story that, they came in, he just got this diagnosis of a disease that could kill him. And they came in with like a 27-page consent form to have him join a research study. And as opposed to just being scared and vulnerable and desperate and willing to sign anything, he was overwhelmed and said no because it was just too much. And as an ethicist, I'm as concerned about a decision like that. What if this was a study that, if he had the time, if they came at a better time and had a good conversation, what if that was a study he would have wanted to participate in? Whether he says yes or no is secondary, really, to me. The question is, does he understand that yes or no? Is that yes or no a reflection of who he is as an individual, and is he making the right decision for him? And if that changes over time, as you noted, a fundamental right that research participants have is to stop study participation at any time, and they can withdraw at any time with no penalty, with certainly no consequence to their health care. I mean, you have to think about the physicians who are doing this research. They're doing it because they want to help patients. And if you decide not to stop participating in one of their research studies, at the end of the day, they just want to keep their patients healthy and help their patients. So the last thing they want to do is have you withdraw from a study and then think that you're going to get, they're not going to treat you as well as they would if you finish the study. That's really the furthest thing in their mind, because they really are in this to help their patients.
I was just thinking about what you mentioned about how when we're working with those patients or participants in a study, and like your friend that had a 27-page approval or to be involved in research, there's other precautions that the IRB really looks at, like how do you approach participants? How do you make them feel comfortable? What do you do to kind of break things down so they're not overwhelmed? Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So we look at, one thing to understand about informed consent for research, for medicine, whatever, it's so much more than the piece of paper, than the consent form. That piece of paper is supposed to just be a documentation that you had the conversation and the person agreed to enroll in the study. What's critically important is the conversation. And we work with researchers and people who work on research all the time and talk about, listen, the consent process is not you reading word for word this entire consent form and without deviating. And we try to encourage you do what you need to do to get this information to the potential research participant in a way that's useful and digestible for them so that they can make a decision for themselves. And so if that means changing up the verbiage or simplifying, or, I've shadowed researchers and watched them sketch things out on a paper towel to explain something, and that's what we really want to see there, is people taking the time and being flexible to tailor their conversation to the person that's in front of them. I mean, I had one cancer researcher that I was shadowing for a while, and she said, after they gave him the consent form, he was able to read it, and she sat down, she said, listen, I know there's a lot in that consent form. What I want to talk to you today about is what might happen and what is going to happen. And she talked about things like, your hair is going to fall out, this and that, and really distilled it down, because those consent forms can be really long. And a good researcher or a good study team member is able to kind of read the room and read the patient and tailor the conversation to that individual. And the IRB is looking at that too. We're not just reading the consent form and reviewing the consent form. We're asking questions about where is that conversation going to take place? How long does a patient have to make a decision? And how quickly might they make a decision? Are you going to let them sign it right then, right there? Or are you going to encourage them to take it home and discuss it with family, friends, maybe their next door neighbor who's a nurse, something like that? We're asking all those questions to make sure the conversation is as good as it can be.
That's key what you mentioned about, letting people take time. Because I always feel like if I'm getting pressured right away for things, then I'm kind of back away, because I want to make sure I'm comfortable. And so, having that time for people to really get a chance to feel comfortable with what's going on, to have more discussion with their family members, more with other clinicians, is really key and important. It looks like we have a caller on the line. Good morning, caller. Thank you for joining us at the table.
Good morning. I just had a question with respect to the statement of, if you decide you no longer want to participate in the program or the study, how is that? And I have multiple questions, so let me know if you can't answer something so that I can proceed to my next question. But if you decide you do not want to participate in one study, is your information taken out just for that study, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really does depend on the study. And that's something where we want to make sure that, from the IRB's perspective, it's explained to people up front and they understand it. So usually, if you withdraw from a study, you can also have your data removed from the study. Not always. So, for example, if it's a clinical trial for a new drug, the FDA needs that safety information. And so some of the safety information, they might not be able to withdraw. The only other case in which you might not be able to withdraw your information from a study is if, to protect your privacy and confidentiality, in some studies, we'll take the data and we will do what's called de-identify it, meaning we remove anything that identifies that blood pressure value to you as an individual. And so we no longer know, so it's in a big database, and we no longer know whose data that is. So in that situation, again, to protect your privacy and confidentiality, if researchers de-identified it, we actually can't remove it, because we can't find which data is yours anymore once it's been de-identified. But again, that's really important for researchers to explain on the front end. This is how we're going to handle your data. And if you can choose to stop participating in the trial at any time, but here's what that will mean in this study. If we've still got your data in some way identified, we can destroy it, we can delete it, we can shred it, whatever. But in some cases we don't, but we need to let you know up front what the case is in this individual study.
Okay, caller,
Okay.
you said you had another question too?
So as you're participating in this program, your information is being used for a particular study, and you are cognizant of what study your information is being used in. Is that correct?
Well,
that's the goal, yes.
Yeah. I want to speak to like the All of Us research program, which is a little different than some of the other things that he's talking about, because the All of Us research program, really, they use your information. They gather, like your electronic health records, your questions, your surveys, your biosamples, and they get that information and they break it down. So then that data is used with various researchers on different projects that they have. If you decide that you do not want to be involved in the program, then we will stop all that. But whatever has gone forward, if that data is there, but everything else would be stopped. And you know, and then you will have the opportunity, if you want to join again, you can. There might be different studies that take place, and that really depends on what researchers are looking for. And so they might break it down by demographics, like if this is a African American male, ages 40 to 60, maybe have cancer or whatever. And so they'll pull from that. So hopefully that answers your question for our program, at least.
So, just to make sure I'm clear, we're talking about two different research types
Yes.
in terms of, okay, so if you're participating in the All of Us program, which you commonly are talking about previously, your information, once it's in, you may decide that you want to stop participating, but they can still continue to use your data. Is that correct?
Only if it's something that's been used already and it's out there, but they will stop it from anything new. Yes.
From anything new?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then that will be noted in the research that this person
Have withdrawn.
decided to
Yes.
withdraw.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We once you decide you want to withdraw, we don't contact you anymore. We take all, we let NIH know, and so there's a process that goes through. But you can always then, if you decide later that you want to come back, you can come back, and then we can collect some new biosamples from you as well.
Okay. And again, I'm still on this soapbox about primary investigators. How many HBCUs are attached to these studies so that the perspective of African Americans, not just clinically, but, therapeutically, how do they play into this?
Actually, just wanted to say that historical Black colleges and universities are heavily involved with the All of Us research program through NIH. There are contracts that they have with them. They have researchers that they are getting on board and trying to get more on board to be a part of this program as well. So we take it very serious to make sure that we target researchers of color and African American as well.
Okay, and my concern is that they are actually primary investigators as opposed to just crunching the numbers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The PIs.
Yeah, there are PIs, yes, that actually work with some of the Black universities and colleges. I think you called us once before, and I had
Yes,
that
ma'am.
information for you. And now I'm just looking at my laptop, thinking, oh man, I need to pull that out again. So
Thank you.
Yeah, so if I can, follow through and do that before the conclusion of today's show, I will make sure that I let the community know as well.
Much appreciated. Thank you both. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. I always love when people call in and challenge, with different questions and everything like that. So I really appreciate you calling in, and feel free to call us with questions because we have experts that are here today to have some discussion with you. But it's very important for you to know and understand why you want to be involved in research, different levels and different types of research that's out there that you can have an opportunity to participate in to make a difference for years and years to come. We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to ask people if you have any questions. Please call in. If you have any comments or statements, you can call us at 414-444-5250. We'll see you back on the other side. I want to welcome everybody back, listeners. You're at the table this morning with Karen Dotson from the All of Us Research Program. And we also have Deb Nevels here from Cancer Prevention Outreach Program. I might have messed up a little bit, Deb.
At the Medical College of Wisconsin Cancer Center.
Cancer Center.
I'm with the Community Outreach and Engagement. And I brought with me today to the table Dr. Ryan Spellacy, who is over our Institutional Review Board, to talk a little bit about research and the protections for patients. So,
yes, and you know, for people that are just joining us, we really feel a need to educate you as it relates to research. There's various types of research. There's one like the All of Us Research Program where we just collect information from you. We don't give you any type of pills or medication. We're just gathering data and information for researchers then to take it to the next level. But then we also have some other research that are clinical trials where there might be a little bit more intense. And so, Deb, you wanted to talk about the consent process with that?
Yeah. So Dr. Spellacy mentioned earlier consent forms being 27 pages long. As a health educator, you know, I immediately cringe when I think of the length of them. But then as when I think about it and have my bioethicist friend here, Dr. Spellacy, it's important and it's necessary. And I know one of the things that we've added at the medical college, freighted in the medical college, is specifically for clinical trials on the cancer side in the clinic. We have a clinical trial navigator, Miss Adrena Luckett. And Adrena, when patients are found eligible for clinical trials, she'll go in with the doctor. And what Dr. Spellacy was talking about with making sure that you understand, she's really good at reading body language. She's really good at following up with people, and she helps to kind of say, did you have questions? What did you hear the doctor say? And then what her job is to work with our social workers and to remove barriers. So if transportation is a barrier, we had a person who they were unhoused, and that's definitely a barrier. But definitely these consent forms, the length of them are necessary. And Dr. Spellacy being a bioethicist, the other part, Karen, you know how I am. Bioethicist, that's actually a degree. And I love it. I love it. And Dr. Spellacy is a bioethicist. So Dr. Spellacy, if you could talk a little bit more about those consent forms and content and the career of a bioethicist. How in the world did you get where you are?
And you know, right before you do that, I just want to let the caller know that we know you're on the line, and we'll grab you shortly. But I want to hear that definition.
So the consent form, or what's a bioethicist, or both?
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the bioethicist thing. So my PhD is actually in philosophy, and I remember when I was finishing up grad school, I was visiting my wife's family, and my grandmother, my wife's grandmother, asked me, well, Ryan, what do you do as a philosopher? And I said, well, you know, my research is this, and I research on, you know, I'm interested in this and that. And then my wife's mother said, no, just tell her you teach. Oh, okay. So, you know, as a philosopher, my specialty is bioethics, and I have to say, when I tell people sometimes when I finished grad school, there were two things I swore I would never work on as a specialty, and they were research ethics and abortion. And I didn't want to work in abortion and ethics of abortion because I felt like, and I still feel, that really all the ethical work has been done there. There's nothing new to be done. The arguments have been made. And research ethics to me was dull and boring and just applying regulations. And then about 9 months into my job at MCW, the dean came up to me and said, hey, Ryan, you're an ethicist, right? And I said, yeah. And he said, you should join one of those IRBs. And, you know, the dean comes up to you and you're 9 months out of grad school. Okay. So I said yes. And I found it was a really fascinating field and a place where, you know, you could really make a difference. There was a lot of, you know, what we sometimes call low-hanging fruit and things to improve and make it better for people enrolling in research, make it easier for researchers to do research with an ultimate goal of improving the health of our community. And so that been my focus, and I've really worked a lot on community engagement in research and making sure that the community is heard and engaged in the research process, and not just engaged in the sense of, okay, community, we have this research study, come participate, but help us design the studies, help us set the priority. What should we be, what questions should we be asking, what diseases are important in our community, and help us design a study that works in the community. And informed consent. And actually, we just got funding from Advancing a Healthier Wisconsin to look at shortening our consent forms, drastically shortening our consent forms, because the two things we know from the research that work to improve participant understanding in research and the consent forms is drastically shortening the consent form, and people like you were just talking with, these navigators who can help people follow up with questions, things like that. And to me, those roles are just critically important because they make it possible for people that otherwise wouldn't be able to participate in a research study, that want to participate in a research study, to do so. Because again, if you don't want to participate in the research study, that's fine. I support you 100%. I just want to make sure that you understand the choice you're making, and that yes or that no is authentic and reflects you and your values.
Thank you so much. I believe we want to go to the caller now.
Yeah, caller, you at the table. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. It's me again, Andre Lee.
Hello,
Good
Mr.
morning.
Andre. Good morning.
Good morning, ladies. Two things. Number one, I want to congratulate. I just think it's so important that WNOV keep allowing these kind of informational talk shows, especially as it relates to mental health and opportunities for people to continue to go and grow. And we need more of them too, speaking to the management there and whatever it takes to make that happen. We wait for you all when you come on. Be interesting what could happen if we had everyday access to this kind of information. So I'd like to see that happen. Secondly, Deborah Neville, I would like to offer to you to say somehow we should work together, talk together, because I'd like to know what information do you already have in brochure form or index card form or written down that we can give to men, especially when we're here at the Cage, because we get a lot of men that come over and we do a lot of men programming. Our Black Tuxedo event is coming up, and it's going to be all about men's health and wealth, spiritual and physical. And so we want to make sure it's included there. But more importantly, too, Deborah, and to the host, we are looking for more opportunities to feature community informational talks and sessions around these things. I was just having a conversation about prostate cancer with a young man, 55 years old, the other day here at Cage, and I didn't know exactly what to say to him. And hearing today some things that I learned, he's going to be here this morning. I'm going to tell him some of the things that I heard on here and some places that he could go to get the information from. So, because a lot of the issue with Black men, especially I find, is that they don't know, and when they find out, some of them will move on it. But if we could develop a did you know kind of index card that has 3 or 5 things on it that are important for men, especially Black men, to do, that would be really, really helpful. So thank you, ladies, for this opportunity, but thank you more importantly for you in this program. It's very important.
Thank you for coming and sitting at the table with us. The other young lady that called earlier related to some of the Black historical colleges related to research and who are some of the PIs. I did find that email, and basically at Howard University, they're looking at African ancestry information and obesity and cancer. They're also looking at sickle cell, colorectal cancer, hypertension. I have a list. And then also Tuskegee University, looking at racial disparities and gastric cancer, breast cancer, the effects of genetics, barriers to your immune therapies, clinical trials, and HIV-infected Black women, African ancestry information, obesity and cancer. And then also, I was just looking at some of the other universities, Southern University of New Orleans, Morgan State University, North Carolina Central University, and North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. So that kind of gives you an idea of some of the research and studies that are going on with some of the PIs for the All of Us research program. There are multiple more, but I wanted to give you an idea of what has been happening in the area in the United States related to our historical Black colleges and universities. But let's go back a little bit, Deb.
Sure.
Let's kind of go back to what we were talking about. We have about maybe 10 minutes left.
Yep.
And for those that are joining us, I just wanted you to be aware that we wanted to really give you an understanding or provide information so you can have a better understanding of what's really related to research and how important it is and how we take it very seriously. We take it very serious as far as ensuring that you are protected. And Deb, we have a caller that's on the line right now that's joining us, is sitting at the table with us,
Yeah.
that does a lot with the institution at the medical college related to this.
Yeah, and Dr. Spellacy is, as we've said, is with the Institutional Review Board, which reviews all research that goes on the campus. And one of the things I want to kind of drop a hint for the community. Dr. Spellacy and I have been trying to work for a while to get some stuff together. So, Dr. Spellacy, I'm making a commitment to you and the community right here.
Okay, let's hear that.
First quarter. Can we do something first quarter of 2025? Let's get it rolling.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay.
And there's a lot of things that's going on. I just want it's important, as Mr. Ellis said, that it's important that the information gets out to the community. And as Dr. Spellacy was saying, the importance of being able to make an authentic decision. Authentic meaning it's truly because you've had all of the information that you need, all of your questions were answered, and that you feel comfortable with the decision that you're making. And part of the protections of the IRB is to make sure that the information, all information, is given to you up front.
Right.
But the thing is that without the research, you can look left and right, and individuals who are here today because someone participated. And Dr. Izzard was saying earlier, and I think you too, Karen, we've been saying this for eons, that, we as African Americans don't necessarily want to participate because of history and mistrust. But I'm offering, and Dr. Spellacy is, as he said, he's into community engagement and being at the table from the beginning. And that means that the community is participating and helping us design what is the priority, what is the real question.
Yes.
And again, I have to bring up Dr. Stolle again. She has community scholars that actually are individuals that are community members that work with our researchers, our basic scientists. So Dr. Spellacy was talking about individuals who work at the lab and with the cells. And we have community members who are paired with basic scientists, asking the questions, developing a research question, and then developing a potential project. That's community involvement from the beginning. And so much of this research that we do, even in the development, as Dr. Spellacy was mentioning, the recent grant that he receives on how to modify a consent form, the health educator in me is like, woohoo, yes. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, how we can make it very concise, but still have everything that you need to know. And how do we pair this with someone like a clinical trial navigator to make sure that patients are getting all of the information and that they're making an informed decision about whether or not to participate.
And that's key too, Deb, that we want to make sure that people are informed, they're protected, and they're heard. The other thing that we have with the All of Us research program, and a lot of research programs have, is community advisory boards and a participant advisory board as well. And so we have to share information with these boards on what's going on. And if there's certain situations that we want to make sure they're aware of. So we bring it to them and we say, okay, this is what's going on. Let's hear your thoughts. What should we do? What should we do? How should we handle this? Should we, also inform like the National Institute of Health, like this is our concern. This is what we would recommend. And so there are measures in place on a local end as well as a national end to ensure. And then sometimes we might run it past our IRB institution at the medical college. So that way
Yep.
we can make sure that everything is being considered, that we don't take anything lightly. And if it's questionable, we're going to make sure that it's brought to the forefront.
And Dr. Spellacy, if you can speak to community advisory boards in that role.
Oh, community advisory boards, sorry, are essential to ethical research. They're yet another piece that makes sure that the research is as good as it can be, as ethical as it can be. And so they're also, often in collaboration with the IRBs, we will get information from the community advisory boards, but they're also informing the PIs on how to do this research better and meet the highest ethical standards for the community. So it's one more piece of the puzzle in doing really high quality research, not just good methods and good study design, but ethically as well. And so community advisory boards, I feel very strongly about that. They really are essential to any kind of research, and we can tailor these boards to whatever we're studying. It could be for a geographic or ethnic community. We can also have community advisory boards that are disease focused. So maybe there's an epilepsy study that has an advisory board with patients and families with epilepsy. And so it's really an opportunity to just take it another step further to make the research as good as it can be.
What about participant advisory boards? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think those are important as well. We have, on our IRBs, for example, we have former research participants themselves telling us and speaking to their experiences in research, and they're on the IRB, and they are essential. And you can also have both, community advisory boards will often have former research participants or current research participants, and they're great. They're wonderful. They give you a perspective that you might not have, and they can understand. They're the ones that'll look at that consent form and say, I just read this consent form and I know what the study is doing, and I'm not getting that from the consent form. And so we can take a step back and say, okay, this is great.
Listeners, today we really wanted to bring something to you to get you a better understanding about research, to allow for you to be more comfortable with, what are your rights of being involved with research? What are some opportunities you might come across to be involved in research? There's multiple different research programs going on at the Medical College of Wisconsin. And Deb, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we have so many. I say all the time, and Dr. Spellacy, I will not do this. I'm being nice, but I have researchers that are walking around that ask questions about questions. I say all the time, I could throw a stone and probably hit one. They're around and they are curious, and their questions are so. Some of them I don't understand because it's basic science, and so I ask them, okay, get out the whiteboard, piece of paper, flip chart, whatever it takes, explain this to me. And they will. It's because it's exciting to them that someone is asking the question, but also the goal is for us to have healthier communities. And without research, that will not happen. I'm grateful for Dr. Spellacy and the work that he and the IRB do, because it makes sure that our communities are protected. And I'm grateful for the work that our researchers, the number of research studies that we have going on all the time is like huge. It's ridiculous how many studies we have. And it's not only, like you said, we have all of us, we have behavioral and we have clinical. So please call if there's more questions. 414-955-2364 is my number.
We're just about out of time today, but I wanted to let people know that if you're interested in joining the All of Us research program, you can call 414-955-2689, or you can go to joinallofus.org. You can also look at, and Dr. Spellacy, you can let people know that if they're interested in being involved in some of the other research programs at the Medical College of Wisconsin, is there a website that they can go to for that?
Yeah, there is. If you go to ncw.edu and you just search for research, you can actually sign up for, and I've done this, you can sign up for notifications for research that you might be eligible for. So you can do a quick little questionnaire and talk about, these are my conditions, this is me, and they'll try to find something that might be of interest to you.
This is Karen Dotson, and you're at the table with us this morning. It's been great conversation. We talked about COVID. We talked about the flu vaccine. We talked about research. We talked about the institute, the IRBs, and how important the Institutional Review Board is, and also why you might want to consider being involved in research. And there's different levels of research that you can be involved in. And so we talked about that today, and hopefully you can make some good decisions and kind of move forward, because we're going to be here to constantly give you information that hopefully will be able to help you and your families. This is Karen Dotson from the All of Us Research Program at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and I have
Deb Nevels and Dr. Ryan Spellacy, both from the Medical College.
We thank you for joining us today. Everybody have a wonderful, wonderful week. We'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks. Take care.
Thank you.